Yeah. Please tell me that I can't, that I won't, that I fail, that I'll never make it out, yeah.
All right, everybody, welcome back to That Effin' Sports Show. We've got Adam Hulse back. The draft is over. We are in the wake of the draft, and now everybody gets to analyze and criticize and try and decide who did the best, who did the worst. And the truth is, we really won't know until the season starts, or probably even for a couple of years as these players get settled into the NFL. Some good guys that'll impact early, and we'll talk about that. Adam, right off the bat, let's talk about some of the teams that had the best draft. Everybody's talking about the Eagles. Of course, they obviously had a great draft. Who else in your mind had like a really great draft?
Look, I mean, when we did our first round reaction episode, I said the Seahawks were my favorite team from the first round, and I'm going to stick with the Seahawks. I think that they continued to make solid picks throughout the draft, especially getting Zach Charbonnet to pair with Kenneth Walker. I think the Seahawks are really moving all in right now, and they're saying, look, we're in a weak NFC conference. It's a wide open conference. Why can't we be the team that comes out of it? I think they believe they have as good of a shot as anybody in the conference. They probably have a strong case for that. Pete Carroll's getting up there in age, and he said, look, let's push all our chips in and let's make a run at it.
I mean, they really went all in. They've got their quarterback, grabbed Devin Witherspoon to put on the other side. They go JSN. These are first-round picks. I mean, right off the bat, they're like, we're taking top guys that are going to play right now. And they really have just kind of kept continuing to make a statement. Derek Hall out of Auburn off the edge. They grabbed Charbonnet at running back to help with that. They even take another running back in the 7th round just to see what's going to happen. They really went for need, making a statement that they are here to compete this year in the NFL.
And they should be. I mean, they surprisingly made the playoffs last year. A lot of people, myself included, when they named Geno the starter last year, I thought they were tanking. I think a lot of people thought they were tanking and trying to get one of these top quarterbacks. Geno had a career year. He got himself the extension. The Seahawks have just as good of a chance in this NFC as just about any of the other teams in there, with the question marks surrounding the other teams as well. The NFC's weaker with Aaron Rodgers leaving. If I'm the Seahawks, I'd go for it right now too.
Yeah, they're definitely jumping on it. Another team that really kind of played the game well. What I mean by that is they made trades, they looked for opportunities, they grabbed Paris Johnson right off the bat, and then they just kind of keep doing this throughout the entire draft, making trades, grabbing players that they need. We kind of talked about this earlier today about how they really didn't reach, and that's Arizona. They picked the right people at the right time, addressing needs, but not getting crazy with.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Cardinals needed a lot. They needed to address a lot on the roster, so I love what they did strategically in this draft. They pretty much went for what's the best value pick of where we're picking right now, and a lot of those picks are upside picks. I mean, Michael Wilson from Stanford getting drafted later in the 3rd round, super talented receiver. If not for all the injuries at Stanford, he probably would have been selected a lot higher had he played a full career. They obviously grab a quarterback in the 5th round, Clayton Tune. Kyler Murray probably not going to be ready for the start of the season. Now they have a guy in Tune with some athletic ability as well who could step in. Owen Pappoe taken shortly after him, super athletic linebacker. Again, you just look right down their list of picks. Great picks in the spots they took them, and pretty much every pick across the board has upside.
Yeah, as long as Michael Wilson can stay healthy, like you talked about, he's going to be a great pick if you get 100% healthy Michael Wilson. Yeah, that's the question mark. But again, they didn't take him until round 3. If he doesn't pan out, then they could have done worse, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Another team that's doing well or getting good reviews, and I like it. I think they have potential to have a fantastic draft class. I think this is one of those classes that might develop over time, but that's the Indianapolis Colts. Pass on Levis and they take Richardson. And we all saw what happened with Levis. I think Levis went to a good spot actually, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Indianapolis, however, overall, I think they did a really good job. They again, addressed needs. They plugged holes, used the picks that they had where they needed to use them, grabbing the people that are going to best help their team in the future.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk Richardson, look, I mentioned it on our reaction show. I mentioned it on our AFC South preview show. I think Richardson has been their guy all the way at quarterback. in particular because they hired Shane Steichen to take over as head coach. Richardson can now come in and run a lot of those same plays that Steichen designed for Jalen Hurts last year. They have the athletic guy who can do that now. But you're right, when you look at the rest of the Colts draft, they had a ton of picks. They addressed a lot of areas. I love the trio of cornerbacks that they took, all three of them in the spots they were taken, I thought were excellent picks. And then you look at the receiver they took in the third round, Josh Downs. What I think the Colts were truly missing last season on their offense, besides a quarterback, was a guy who could take the top off the defense. They had the possession receivers. They didn't have the home run threat. Josh Downs can be that for them this year.
And look, Anthony Richardson can get a ball downfield and a long way downfield. So now with Josh Downs, he's got someone to catch it. You brought up the cornerback core that they kind of went through. I think Darius Rush out of South Carolina, I think is a fantastic bargain in the 5th round. I think he's a fantastic, and I get to see him a little more living in South Carolina, I guess, but he's someone that we're going to be talking about later on. We've got the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers had a typical Pittsburgh draft. They took players where they needed them. They don't really need a lot in the sense, I'm not saying they're like a Super Bowl team, but they have players there all ready to develop from last year's draft. So I think they took players that they can develop. Overall, they're getting pretty good grades. As a Steelers fan, I'm comfortable with what they took. No big splashes, kind of in a Tomlin-esque move. You don't really get the big, risky, news headline-making picks, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Steelers did a great job addressing areas of need. I think they took some good upside picks, you know, in the middle rounds, guys like Washington, Herbig, later rounds, Trice, like those are all good picks for the spots that they took them in. And to me, the weird thing with the Steelers was, where's all the wide receivers and linebackers? Usually that's all the Steelers draft, right?
Well, I mean, it is a thing, but, you know, we're definitely feeling good at wide receiver right now, and I think we got enough linebackers. I think the holes are plugged there, so I'm glad that they kind of went for those secondary guys in Trice, in Porter, you know, like you said, Herbig on the edge. They really kind of addressed the defense, which is very Pittsburgh-esque. I'll take it. We didn't have a lot of picks this year. Again, our draft picks were really last year, and we'll see how this all meshes and develops. You, my friend, are a Dallas Cowboys fan. A lot of moves made this year, obviously, at the running back position, at the tight end position. I felt that the Cowboys kind of addressed it in a weird order, I guess. They take some edge guys that a lot of people really liking Overshown, liking Fehoko, but you guys already have fantastic defenders. Are we just plussing this up? You guys got Micah Parsons. How do you feel as a Cowboys fan about how your team did?
Well, this wasn't your typical Jerry Jones draft, right? Jerry Jones has that reputation, and he's done many times over the years. He usually makes a big splash on draft day. He drafts a guy that kind of makes the fans go, whoa, I didn't see the Cowboys doing that. Okay, they didn't really need that player, but that's an awesome pick for them. You know, CeeDee Lamb was an example of that. Dez Bryant was an example of that. That's been kind of the Jerry Jones way. Even Ezekiel Elliott was that at the time. This year, they took a different approach. They drafted more positions of need, which I can't really criticize them for, you know, bulking up the positions that needed a little bit of help. And let's remember, the Cowboys kind of already made their semi-splash moves in the trade market. They traded for Stephon Gilmore. They traded for Brandon Cooks. Both of those moves were two moves I did not see coming at all. I don't think anybody really saw that coming at all for the Cowboys. Yeah. So if you want to talk Jerry Jones slash, he just did it differently this year. He did it before the draft rather than in the draft.
Yeah, they really did kind of work the offseason free agent market, available player market, and so they didn't have to get too risky with the draft. A lot of people kind of grade in the middle of the road. What do you grade the Cowboys? Because, I mean, are they getting the grade because they didn't make a big splash? Because like you said, they did address needs. So is that kind of where a little negativity, I guess, is coming, that they didn't do the big Cowboys thing?
You know, like, I don't see a true, like, impact player that they drafted. But again, they drafted for areas that they needed to get deeper at. So for me, that's a C. You know, like, you didn't do anything that's going to, like, significantly move the needle in the draft, but you improved your roster in areas that needed to be improved. Give me a solid C, middle of the road.
Who blew it?
I mean, for me, that team is still the Detroit Lions. On our last episode, the head scratcher in the first round, drafting a running back with the 12th overall pick and then going 18th pick on a middle linebacker. I mean, look, nothing against Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell. They are two of the best players at their positions in this draft, but where they were taken just doesn't make sense, and the team that took them, it doesn't make sense. I don't think the Lions are in a spot right now where they can afford to just be making luxury picks like running backs and linebackers in the first rounds. They have much more pressing needs that I think that they should have taken care of first, in particular on the defensive side of the ball. As great as their offense was last year, their offense almost carried them to a playoff spot. They fell one game short. Their defense was a disaster. They gave up like 1 million points last season, so I would have liked them to see a little bit of a better job addressing areas of needs instead of making luxury picks like they're already something that they're not.
Yeah, it was a weird order. Running back, and then they take a linebacker, and then they take a tight end. I do like the Brian Branch at safety in round 2. Kind of surprised he went that far. They got Hendon Hooker. It's kind of like the Jordan Love under Goff, I guess. He could pan out that way. Hendon Hooker is a fantastic quarterback before he got hurt. Hopefully he comes back. Kind of still head scratching. People liking what they did. Again, a team that I think we're going to have to wait to see.
Well, one more thing with the Lions, though, too. You said that the Lions, didn't make the splash, and I agree with you, but I think the Lions believe that they did make the splash. I'm sure you saw that video that came out of their draft room when they selected Gibbs. They were acting like they just won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I think they believe taking Gibbs is that splash player that's going to transform the entire franchise. I don't really see that for where the Lions are as a whole, but if they believe it, I guess we'll see.
And they definitely had a plan there. So obviously the next day they deal off Swift to the already rich Eagles. The rich get richer. And so they obviously had a plan to, if they got the running back that they wanted, that's what they wanted to do in the first round. And they knew they were going to unload Swift afterward. Maybe those two things combined. I still don't like the running back as the first pick. Maybe that adds a little more reason to why they did what they did.
Yeah, maybe. Look, the Lions, to me, were the most head-scratching team with the order, like you kind of pointed out, too. But the Lions believe they did well. So if they believe it, maybe they're going to prove us all wrong.
Yeah, maybe. Teams picking not well. How do you feel about Atlanta? A lot of people giving Atlanta a lot of grief for what they did in the first round. Overall draft, they seem to be getting pretty good grade.
I like what they did as a whole, and I get that Bijan Robinson at 8 for the Falcons was a polarizing pick because the Falcons are kind of in rebuilding mode right now. They have a lot of areas on their roster that need help. But look, we all agree that we think Bijan Robinson is a special player.
Sure,
a lot of people
absolutely.
calling him a generational talent. And if they had the opportunity to get a player like that, who could potentially change the entire direction of their franchise if he is what he could be. I don't hate the pick as much as some people do. If Bijan is as good as Bijan can be, it's hard to criticize any team for taking him regardless of position, right?
No, I agree with that. His name's going to come up as this show goes on because I have a couple more questions about specific draft picks. Honestly, Atlanta, they only had 6 picks, and I think that's something that maybe people aren't factoring in. They only had 6 picks for the whole draft. So the people they took really had to bring value now. They had to be people that were going to sustain in the future. They didn't have the picks to take chances. I'm not saying they didn't necessarily take chances or not. That remains to be seen. Only having 6 picks, if you really want the guy, you got to take them sitting in the 8th spot.
Right. And their offense was bad last year. Their offense was projected this season to be one of the worst offenses. So if they said, look, here's a guy we can pick that may make us at least a middle of the road offense immediately just by adding him, maybe he is the guy.
I think he's going to be fantastic. I think he's got a future.
Right. The other picks, too. Maybe they're also being realistic that, we're not going to be good this year regardless. We are still building a future team. And sure, you could make the case that if they feel that way, they shouldn't even be looking at running backs. But again, if Bijan really is a generational type player, they can now, instead of trying to build around the quarterback, Ritter, who we don't know what he is, they can build their entire scheme around Bijan Robinson.
It's a fair point. It's a great point made by Adam Hulse at Adam Hulse Sports on Twitter at SportsKeeda. Been joining us throughout this whole draft process. We continue to talk draft. How do you feel about Minnesota overall? They obviously get a fantastic wide receiver. How do you feel about the overall product?
Well, I like the Jordan Addison pick a lot. He was a guy that, look, before this season, most people had Jordan Addison as their number 1 or number 2 wide receiver in this entire draft class. It was Addison and JSN were the top 2 guys pretty much across the board, right? How he hurt himself. I mean, he had a little bit of a down year in production. He switched schools. That's fine. It was the combine that kind of hurt his perception a little bit, right? He measured a little bit smaller than he was supposed to be. He ran slower than he was supposed to run. But I mean, realistically, if he lives up to his potential and where he was a year ago, I mean, that's a great pick for the Vikings to pair with Justin Jefferson, especially considering Adam Thielen just left this year as well. They could now have this awesome, young, dynamic, talented 1-2 punch at the wide receiver position.
Yeah, and then they grabbed 2 cornerbacks afterwards, which is an absolute need for Minnesota. We know how bad they were against the pass, so I think that was actually really good. Minnesota, again, another team with only 6 picks. I think people are being a little hard on them for what they took. I mean, they did take a quarterback in the 5th round. I think maybe they could have addressed a different need there. They took a running back in the 7th round. It's the 7th round. Take who you want. We already know they got a Cook issue. We don't know how long that, how that's going to go. Honestly, we don't know how the entire Minnesota running back room is going to play out over the next year, to include the facts that this might be Cousins last year. I think they did what they could, what they got. I'm not mad at Minnesota at all.
I think the Vikings did a good job. And again, you mentioned Cousins, you mentioned the running backs. Dalvin Cook could very well still be on his way out the door. He's been involved in trade rumors for months now, it seems like. They got a developmental quarterback in the 5th. He doesn't have to play right away because Cousins is still there. Kind of like we talked about with Hendon Hooker possibly being, the future replacement for Goff, and they can develop him that way. The Vikings can kind of do that with Jaron Hall as well. And then getting a running back in the 7th round, as good as Dwayne McBride, he is a very good running back to be taken in the 7th round. When you look at his college numbers, I mean, I know it was at UAB, so you have to temper those numbers a little bit, but he was a monster during his career.
Well, look, you look at guys like Marshall Faulk, who came from San Diego State and things like that. You get the right guy in the right spot, there's no reason they can't have success. The guy's got the size, he's got the speed. Running backs like that, that's why running backs interchangeable. That's why nobody understands when people take running back to the 1st round, because the position literally doesn't change from the time you start playing it in Pop Warner to NFL. You get wide receivers and you got to be good at route running. You got to be good at making moves and cuts. Quarterbacks obviously learn progressions and how to read defenses. Running back just has to know which hole to hit and when to hit it. You get guys like Robinson and stuff who are pass catchers, and those guys kind of separate themselves a bit. But when you're talking about handing the ball to a guy, watching him truck through, you just need someone that knows which hole to hit and has the speed once he hits it. And I think that's situation that where Minnesota probably made a good pick and got some good value in round 7.
Yeah, I mean, and you're 100% right, because, what you're saying, like, the position never really changes with running back, and that's especially with these one-cut power runners, right? See the hole, hit the hole. That's it. It's pretty simple when you're that style of running back. And as you alluded to with wide receivers, and today in the NFL, as we know, like all these offensive schemes, they're kind of asking their receivers to read the defense in the same way that the quarterback is. The old days of set routes are pretty much going out the windows, and almost every route that receivers are running now are usually multiple options depending on what the defense is doing. So, it's not just run and get open anymore. It's asking these receivers to see the defense through the quarterback's eyes and do what your quarterback would want you to do with that nonverbal type of communication.
100% agree on that. Miami Dolphins screwed themselves, screwed their team by offseason actions. So they only get 4 picks. I love that they grabbed cornerback Cam Smith out of South Carolina. Again, another guy I think is going to do well. But then they grab a running back. They have like more running backs than anybody else in the NFL right now. They can grab a tight end when they just made a big deal for a tight end. I don't understand what Miami did. They only had 4 picks. We talked about the last 2 teams only having 6 picks, making value out of low picks. Miami's the team that I think completely blew the draft after the first pick. which didn't come till round
Yeah,
two.
I mean, it's hard to make much of a difference with 4 picks, especially when you don't have any of them in the first round. I'm not thrilled with the picks that they made either. I'm with you on that. I do like Cam Smith as a cornerback, but the rest of their draft, to me, just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
And that was my thing.
Especially considering, like we both like Cam Smith as a cornerback, but remember, they just traded for Jalen Ramsey too, and you're going to use your first pick, your only semi-premium pick in that second round on a corner. I mean, it's a little strange. I don't really know what their strategy was.
Cornerback, running back, tight end made zero sense to me. I don't know. Everybody likes him as a coach, so maybe he obviously knows more than I do. I'll admit that. Who is the big pick for you this year? Who was the one that you were like, yes, that team won. That's the pick right there for this year's draft. There may be a couple here.
JSN for me. For me, it's got to be JSN. And I know I've talked a lot of Seahawks, but I really do love what the Seahawks did. And I mean, when we're talking JSN, last year he had the injury. The year before that, he set the Buckeyes record for most receiving yards in a single season. He did so competing for targets with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson just won the Offensive Rookie of the Year award. Chris Olave quickly emerged as the best wide receiver on the Saints. JSN is supposed to be significantly better than both of them. Adding him now to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, absolutely love the JSN pick.
I like the JSN pick. For me, the obvious one is the Eagles. I love what they did in the entire first round, to be perfectly honest. I think Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith, grabbing both those guys in the first round to pair them with the rest of your Georgia defense. You grab Ringo later on. But to me, those were two standout picks. Those are guys who are going to start now. Those are guys who are going to play and have impact right now. I also, honestly, I like the Levis pick by Tennessee. I felt like they kind of ate a little crow, acknowledged that Malik may not be the guy that we thought he was last year, and so we need to fix that. Levis is still there. They go ahead and grab him. I think they got tremendous value out of him. I think Tennessee made a fantastic pick by grabbing Levis when they grabbed him. Everybody doesn't feel that way. How do you feel about it?
Look, I mean, all reports out there is that the only reason why Levis slipped was because of his interviewing, because teams weren't necessarily sold on his personality, his leadership qualities, and how serious he is about, putting in the work and really being a 24/7 quarterback, which is hard work, a lot of work. It's a tough job. And, if you're not fully committed to it, or if there's questions about commitment, I mean, hey, look at Kyler Murray, right? That whole mess with the homework clause and that he cares more about Call of Duty than he does the playbook. And all those crazy storylines that came out of Arizona right after they paid him that massive contract, maybe teams were kind of thinking of Levis in that sense, not so much necessarily like Kyler Murray, but kind of avoiding that guy who maybe they think doesn't care enough about football, but cares more about being popular and having this celebrity type of name.
Who had the worst pick? What's the worst overall pick? I mean, we're not getting in the 5th and 6th rounds, obviously, or 7th rounds and stuff like that.
For me, I got to go back to the Lions, and it's not even Jahmyr Gibbs, because I think that Jahmyr Gibbs can actually be an impact player, though I highly disagree with when and where the Lions took them, given his situation. But for me, it was the Jack Campbell pick for the Lions. Jack Campbell, sure, great middle linebacker. Being taken 18th overall is absolutely insane to me. I thought he'd be more of a 2nd or 3rd round pick, if I'm being completely honest about that. The Lions had a lot of stuff that I think that they could have done much better in addressing in this draft. What made the Jack Campbell pick even worse, besides taking middle linebacker at 18, is when you pair it with the fact that they already made weird positional luxury pick in Gibbs 6 picks earlier, and then they doubled down on the weird strategy by going middle linebacker.
I can't really argue that one. It was weird. There's some other picks in the first round that I don't like, but I can jump on that one. We're going to see how it pans out. I'm sure he's going to be a great linebacker. Honestly, I don't know if he's still going to even be the best linebacker out of this class, though. And so for me, that makes it even more. You're taking a big chance. It's a big. Every pick is a big chance, but that seems too big.
Yeah, even if he is the best middle linebacker in this class, even if he, emerges to be one of the top middle linebackers in the league, he's still not worth an 18th overall pick, in my opinion, especially when you're in a situation like the Lions. I alluded to it before. There's certain teams who can kind of make luxury picks, and it kind of you can throw the positional thing out the window because their roster is complete and they're just trying to add some finishing touches. The Lions are not one of those teams.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Something like 14 quarterbacks picked in this year's draft. I don't think anybody expected that, first of all. We still had, even though Levis slides, we still had the top 4 taken in that order. And then we get into guys like Hendon Hooker, Jake Henner, Stetson Bennett, Adrian O'Connell to the Raiders, Clayton Tune to Houston, Dorian Thompson-Robinson out of UCLA, Sean Clifford, Jaron Hall, Tanner McGee, and Max Duggan. I'm floored that Duggan goes in the 7th round, first of all. I think he's definitely a guy that can have impact. And then the fact that the Chargers take him, I feel bad for the kid, to be honest, because he shouldn't have gone in the 7th round. He sure as hell shouldn't have gone to the Chargers. I digress. With the cornerbacks, who got the best value? Who messed up?
2 later ones that I kind of like, those like middle type of picks that, we already kind of talked about Hendon Hooker, and we do like that kind of down the road. I really like the Cardinals taking Clayton Tune. I think that pick made a lot of sense with the Kyler Murray injury and with Clayton Tune's athletic gifts. I mean, he can run the ball. He's athletic like that. So they can kind of stick with kind of Kyler Murray's offense. They don't have to change a whole lot if Tune is going to be the guy who fills in while Murray's hurt. And then that's just like a super upside situation for them. If Clayton Tune comes in and plays great, now they have options in the offseason. They could look to trade Clayton Tune because teams are going to see that, like, wow, he was a steal. Maybe he can be our guy. Or they can pivot their direction. If they're really done with Kyler Murray, they can try to dump Kyler Murray to someone else and go with Tune. So it's kind of a win-win type of situation. And even if Tune's a disaster, it really doesn't hurt them much, right? They took him later in the draft. They didn't use a premium pick to get a quarterback. Realistically, he's probably just a temporary short-term thing anyway, but it's kind of like a can't-lose situation, so I did like that. The other one I want to point out is Stetson Bennett to the Rams. Yes. With all the stuff going on with Matthew Stafford, with the injury, we don't know how healthy he is. We don't know how much longer Stafford's going to be around. There's a lot of weird storylines out there right now with Matthew Stafford and with his future seriously being in jeopardy. Stetson Bennett, not the most athletic guy out there. He doesn't have those gifts like a lot of the other players, but he's a proven winner. He did it in college. He did it on the best team in the country. He's an accurate passer. And I think there's a lot of upside there for Stetson Bennett as well in the team situation that he's going to.
See, for me, I'm on the other side of it. Stetson Bennett is my overall what the hell pick. This is why. Number one, they took him in the 4th round. Seems really high to grab Stetson Bennett in the 4th round. I also don't like Aiden O'Connell going to the Raiders in the 4th round either. Both those picks are my head scratchers of the draft at the quarterback position. I would have liked to see Duggan go in that spot. Instead, I really like the Vikings getting Jaron Hall in the 5th round. Cousins being a question, Jaron Hall being a BYU product. At quarterback, for me, Jaron Hall was the value pick in the 5th round. The worst pick for me was Stetson Bennett. So we're going to see how this all plays out. But let me ask you this. Stetson Bennett being taken for the reasons that he was taken, is he seriously someone that you see being an impact player or being a sustainable player over the next few seasons?
Well, the way I see it is, you can't have that much better of a situation than going with Sean McVay if you're a quarterback. He's obviously an offensive genius. He knows how to get the most out of quarterbacks, of course. With the Stafford question marks, the positive to Stetson Bennett is he's not a developmental project. He might not be the most talented guy, but he's ready to play right now. There's nothing that really needs to be developed about Stetson Bennett. He kind of is what he is at this point. He has the maturity. He apparently had great leadership at Georgia. The guys in the locker room loved him. Again, if he has to come in and step in for Stafford, if his injury is as serious as it can be, if he can thrive anywhere, it's probably with Sean McVay.
I'll give you that. The thing that I don't like is exactly what you said. There's not much more that can be added to him. I need potential in my guy. I need stuff that I can build on. And other than maybe arm strength, I don't know. There's a lot. I think he's a peak too sooner. I think he's at his peak, and I need someone who's going to peak later on my team. That's just my analysis of it.
I mean, is Stetson Bennett all that different from like Jared Goff? And didn't, McVay go to a Super Bowl with Goff? I mean, look, I know Goff was a very high draft pick, but when you look at their skill sets and kind of the type of quarterback that they are, is he really all that different than Goff when Goff was a Ram?
As with many of these pets, more to come, and it remains to be seen how it's all going to play out. At the running back position, who's your top, who's your not?
Well, I mean, it's hard not to be super high on Bijan Robinson, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so like you almost have to like ignore that when you're answering this question, because I think everybody's answer in this should be Bijan Robinson.
The low-hanging fruit, if you will.
Right. And I mean, he's, the true difference maker in this draft. Look, like a lot of people say that Jahmyr Gibbs, his skill set is perfect for the NFL. And it very well could be, because Jahmyr Gibbs is an excellent wide receiver as well. He catches passes out of the backfield great. I just don't like where and when and why the Lions took him in that spot. But I'm going to go a little bit deeper in the draft. And the guy that I actually like is Roschon Johnson. Okay. He was the backup for Bijan. In his limited opportunities that he got, he looked really good doing it. He can be an explosive player. He's also a very, very, very good wide receiver out of the backfield. He has the skill set that you'd want in an NFL prospect running back. He just didn't have a whole lot of opportunities to prove it on the field, playing behind a superstar like Bijan Robinson. And when you look at where Roschon got drafted, also going to the Bears situation with Khalil Herbert, with Deontay Foreman, sure, those are two pretty good running backs, but neither of them have that job locked up by any means. It's very possible that Roschon could win the starting job in Chicago.
Roschon's exactly where I was going to go for the top pick, aside from, the obvious. He played in Texas. They know football in Texas. Regardless, going to Chicago, fantastic landing spot for him with his skill set. I think he was definitely the late round value, if you will, of the draft at the running back position. I guess the letdown for me, maybe Tajay Spears, just because he went so soon. He played with Tulane. I'd like to see him come from a better conference. It's hard to say at the running back position. Running back is definitely one of those things that we're going to have to wait and see. Wide receiver. I know you like JSN. JSN, again, I kind of think the low-hanging fruit there. JSN being the guy that's so impactful because of where he went as well.
Yeah, I mean, JSN joining Seattle is going to create such problems for defenses. How do you cover Lockett, Metcalf, and JSN on top of a running game that has Walker and Charbonnet?
Where else did you kind of see teams win at the wide receiver?
I'm going to Zay Flowers.
Yeah.
I'm going to the Ravens. Smart move by the Ravens, getting Lamar Jackson, another wide receiver. We've had several conversations about Odell Beckham Jr. He is a complementary piece. He's not a wide receiver one anymore. He's a guy that's going to help you. He is not the guy who's going to be the ultimate difference maker to completely change the way defenses cover you. Zay Flowers added to this now can add that different element to their offense that they've been missing. I talked about it with the Colts. They needed a guy who could take the top off the defense. The Ravens needed one as well. Zay Flowers is exactly that. He is a true home run threat. The Ravens didn't have one last year after they traded Hollywood Brown away. They have one now in Zay Flowers. I think he truly adds another element to the Ravens offense, and I think that's exactly what they needed.
They needed a wide receiver. They needed an impact play now wide receiver. They definitely got one. And this kid gets to learn from Odell Beckham Jr. Say what you want about the guy. The guy knows how to play the wide receiver position, and he's going to teach Zay Flowers everything he knows. Zay Flowers and Baltimore, the big winner here. Being that you went Zay Flowers, I will pick Jonathan Mingo out of Ole Miss going to Carolina because he's getting paired up with Young there. I think that is a big piece that Young's going to need. I think Mingo being there in the second round, I think that's the perfect spot. I think Carolina got value out of it, and I think he's at the right spot at the right time. I really like Jonathan Mingo going to Carolina right there.
I agree with you. I like that one. He's so good after the catch, too. So it should give Bryce Young in that offense, kind of some cheap yards, kind of like a guy get the ball in his hands and let him go to work. That's what Mingo is. He breaks tackles. I think that was a smart pick for them.
100%. Without getting too deep into it, because again, we don't know really what's going to happen. I guess I'm going to say Quentin Johnson going in the first round to the Chargers. I don't feel like they needed to take a wide receiver in the first round. Good wide receiver, don't get me wrong. If you're going to take one, Quentin Johnson is a good pickup. I'm just not sure the Chargers really needed to go wide receiver in the first round.
They definitely didn't need to go wide receiver in the first round. I agree with you there. And something I alluded to before also with Quentin Johnston is, to me, the pick feels repetitive. He's too much like Mike Williams, in my opinion. They're kind of the same style of receiver, big-bodied, good at the jump ball, good at the deep ball. To me, like, if they were going to go wide receiver, which I don't think they should have because there's other areas they could have addressed, if they were going to, they should have got that speed demon type of wide receiver that their offense doesn't have. When you have guys like, Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, at least get a different style of receiver. I think they just kind of got more of the same that they already had.
Yeah, and I mean, this might be on availability basis as well. This is going to reflect in this, but I want to look at the schools here at the wide receiver position. So Ohio State obviously goes first, but then we get TCU, Boston College, USC, as strong Power Five school, Ole Miss, Michigan State, SMU, then Oklahoma, Houston, a couple from Tennessee, North Carolina. So like the big Power Five schools. Look, you don't see Alabama in the wide receiver position. You don't see Georgia in the wide receiver position. You see a lot of minors in the Power Fives and even a lot of minors, period, as we get into rounds 3 and 4 and 5. You see some Cincinnati guys. You see some Florida guys, Nebraska, Wake Forest, Iowa State, Princeton, Liberty comes in. It's interesting how you see Power 5 guys go at quarterback. You see Power 5 guys go at running back. Even at the cornerback position, you see a lot of Power 5. But when you get a wide receiver, different skill set that people are looking for, maybe?
Yeah, like I think because wide receiver now it's such like, teams are looking just for athletic gifts in their wide receiver. And a lot of wide receiver picks are kind of scheme fit type of picks. Like a lot of teams are looking for a specific type of wide receiver. And there's so many wide receivers on so many rosters. It's such a deep position that I don't think you necessarily need to go Power 5. If you have the hands, if you have the speed, I don't think it matters as much what school you came from. Unlike a quarterback that you want to see them, dissect quality defenses, not, the weaker, minor type of defenses from some of the smaller schools. I don't think it matters as much with wide receiver.
Good players picked across the board, and I love to see how the wide receivers are going to develop, who's coming out and who's not. Rookie of the year prediction out of this draft right now.
Rookie of the year? Oh, man.
I love when I can get Adam Hulse to think about something. If you guys listen to this show, if you guys listen to Adam Hulse do his podcast, do guest spots, it is very hard to surprise the Adam Hulse. It's hard to get him not to have an immediate answer because he's so knowledgeable about what he does. This is a great moment for me. I'm a bask in it here for a second to get you thinking, I've done something right here.
Well, I actually just recently wrote an article with SportsKeeda about 5 guys who can win the Offensive Rookie of the Year award, and my top pick for it was Bryce Young. And when you asked me the question, I kind of wanted to go in a different direction than Bryce Young because, me and you have both kind of talked about our concerns and our, the negatives about Bryce Young and what we'd be concerned about. For me, that's more of like a long-term thing with his size and whatnot. If we're just talking straight rookie season, I think Bryce Young can have a good rookie year with Frank Reich. There's some things to like about his situation in Carolina. He's one of only 3 quarterbacks, along with Stroud and Richardson, who are basically locked into being the starter in week 1. All awards always kind of skew towards quarterbacks. So while, there's JSN, there's Bijan, there's guys like that who can surely win the award, if any of those 3 quarterbacks have a comparable season to another position, it's more than likely going to go to a quarterback, as it usually does with this kind of stuff.
I love that pick. Honestly, I was kind of leaning towards Bijan, same division, different team. But you're right. I mean, Bijan isn't going to play every snap, and Young is. JSN has two amazing wide receivers right next to him who are going to take some of that away. We look at Wilson and Olave who are competing for it. They didn't have a Lockett and a Metcalf sitting around them to take some of those balls. You know, they had to step up and they had to be key guys on the offense. Bijan, obviously the complaint with that pick is that there's other people there around him, although he's definitely going to be in the starter role. I think it's going to come down between Bijan and Young, because look, Young is stepping into a team that has nowhere to go but up. And so he doesn't even have to be the absolute best rookie quarterback in the class. He just has to finish right, number 2, number 3. And it's going to get a lot more attention because he's going to take that team. It's going to be the improvement overall as a team. If the team ends up winning 10, 11 games, obviously they were not set up for that last year. You're right. That could definitely solidify the award. That's a great pick. Don't give Adam a chance to think, because he's going to come up with a good answer. Defensive Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, and before we go to defense, of course we also have to throw Richardson's name in the mix too. For
he could potential. Everything about Richardson's potential. You're right.
Yeah, if he can, dial up a lot of those running plays in a Steichen style offense, even if the Colts don't win a whole bunch of names, Richardson could potentially look really good doing it. We're talking fantasy football. Who doesn't want Richardson on their fantasy team, right? Just because of the upside that he has and the rushing and what he could be. So, obviously keep an eye on Richardson as well. For defensive Rookie of the Year, I'm going to give me Christian Gonzalez.
That's not a bad pick. It's not where I'm
going.
I
like Christian Gonzalez a lot. Problem. He is an absolute athletic freak. He has the size. He has the speed. He got drafted into, maybe the best situation possible that he could have gotten drafted into, because he slid a little bit down the first round. To me, I thought Christian Gonzalez was going to be a top 5 pick, top 10 at worst, because of his skill set, because of his athletic gifts, and because of his proven production at Oregon. Where he ended up going, the system he's into, the talent he has, that's who I'll take.
The Steeler in me wants to go Joey Porter Jr. I'll get it out. Mm-hmm. I'm actually not going too sexy here. I'm going with Devon Witherspoon in the first round. I think he lands in a great spot with Tariq Woolen on the other side. I think that gives teams a lot of difficulty in where to go. Of course, they're going to try and attack the rookie. I think he's got a fantastic skill set. I think he's going to be the guy that ends up benefiting from being on the Seahawks defense. People are going to shy away from Woolen, and that's going to send him his way. Maybe he blows it, but it's going to be one of those things where he's either going to be absolutely horrible, he's going to get picked on, he's going to be horrible, but I don't think that's a guy you take in the first round, especially for the Seattle Seahawks. I'm actually going with Witherspoon as being my defensive Rookie of the Year.
Look, and the Seahawks have a great track record of drafting defensive backs and them turning out to be really good. So if they targeted a guy that high in the draft at cornerback, they see something they like, and the Seahawks, I think, have proven that you can trust their ability to develop and select the right defensive back.
I want to talk about who is going to start, who are your first-year starters, who are your automatic impact players, and I also want to talk about who is still available out there, guys like Ezekiel Elliott. We will 100% talk about that on our next show, so make sure you don't miss it. Thanks for joining us on this one as we kind of run through post-draft analysis. It seems to be the sexy thing to do right now, and hey, we got Adam Hulse. It doesn't get much sexier than that. The Adam Hulse on Twitter. Over at SportsKeeda, you can catch his amazing articles, really fantastic articles. And that's not me just like pumping Adam up. He really has a talent for writing this stuff. Go check out his stuff. Thanks for joining us on That Effin' Sports Show, EFIN, That Effin' Show on Twitter. Adam, once again, it's fantastic having you, and I can't wait to run through the next one.
Yeah, man, this was a great show. I think we covered a lot, but, at each week the season gets closer. There's always going to be more and more to talk about, and I can't wait to do it.
We get that much closer to the first game of the season. We're going to be talking about it all the way until it gets going here at That Effin' Sports Show. For Adam Hulse, I am Chris Fox, and we will see you guys next time. Everybody be safe out there. Have a great one.